Hey everybody, so I wanted to talk a little bit right now about kind of keeping the right perspective slash staying positive during hard times. Like we'll see where this goes. So, as many of you have seen through my past videos, my family is obviously not right now in a camper. Our camper does have mold to the extent that we can't live in it anymore. And it's been kind of, there's been a lot of emotions going on lately within myself and within my children and things like that that we're working through and trying to basically process. And last night, and it's emotions like all over the board, like happiness, sadness, like stress, joy, it's literally all over the board. So um, let's talk a little bit about this with emotions and going through these emotions. So the other day I was talking to my husband and I actually texted him and I was like, I'm crying like all day today. But it was interesting because it was a day where I finally let myself process my emotions. And at that time, on that day, I was actually in a lot of pain. If you've seen from previous videos, that I had basically a really severe reaction to the mold slash kind of got like a sinus infection. I found out I also got pneumonia. Like I went to the doctors, found all this stuff out. Really bad reaction to the mold. And I finally started healing up from all the stuff going on in my face once we got out of the camper. Now we were out of the camper and I had not gone to the doctor yet, but I went the next day. But I was just in a lot of pain. Like I didn't know my cheekbones could hurt so bad, but I felt like I got punched in the face. My face, neck, super swollen. This has happened twice now. So I had a day where I basically was crying for multiple reasons. So here's one of the reasons was there's a lot of actual really, really, really good things going on in our lives right now that are so positive and so from God that I am overwhelmed by God's love for us, for our family, overwhelmed by his blessings towards us and everything like that. If you watched the last video I just posted, you'll see that a wall went up in our cabin. And, overwhelmed by the blessing of having all these amazing people in our lives and everything else. So there's a lot of joyful feelings that I'm feeling, and also just overwhelmed by God's love for us. So there's those happy feelings. Then there's also the feelings of we don't have technically a home right now. I saw a friend this weekend and she's like, how's my favorite homeless family? And I'm like, oh, like it killed me because I was like, yep, we're homeless. We're staying, but at the same time, with that, like, oh, we don't have a home, at the same time, we're immensely blessed because we're staying at a friend's house right now. And so again, there's this stress of homelessness, but this blessing of being able to stay at a friend's place. So again, there's this balance between like, what are you going to focus on? Are you going to focus on the negative of being homeless, or are you going to focus on the positive of being at your friend's house? And then there's the feeling of loss. And this is a big one that initially first hit me because my dad died when I was 20 years old, and he died 10 months after he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And we knew he was sick, and honestly, quite frankly, when we found out he was diagnosed with lung cancer, I knew my dad was going to die. It's just something I knew. So he died. 7 years later, my nephew died completely unexpectedly from an undiagnosed heart condition when he was 14 years old. And so I have felt the very sudden loss of losing loved ones, or very sudden loss of sudden loss, period. And while having to leave the camper suddenly is obviously nowhere near the loss of my father or my nephew, there was still this time period, probably 3 days, 4 days or so after we left the camper, because we literally just left the camper. We decided one night when we were coming back from a gathering with friends that we can't live there anymore. Like, I literally watched my kids' health spiral downward that day. And I told my husband, we can't stay in here anymore. It's making us all sick. Like, the kids are all getting sick again. We have a baby. Like, we can't stay in here. So we literally grabbed some clothes and basically bugged out. And then in the process of the last week, we've been trying very carefully to grab stuff here and there, cleaning it prior to bringing it here, all this stuff. And so for the first 3 or 4 days, though, after we decided to completely just basically abandon our camper, I had the loss of, like, yeah, it's a camper, and it's a 14-year-old camper, so it's not like the nicest thing in the world, but it's still our home. So I had this feeling of loss, of losing our home suddenly. And while yes, it's not like a natural disaster or anything like that, I can't actually physically go back into my camper anymore. My husband went into our camper the other day for a whole 10 minutes and came out, and literally that night he just was super stuffed up, nastiness coming out of his face, the whole 9 yards. And my husband has actually been least affected by the mold in our camper. So you can only imagine, if I went into the camper for 10 minutes, how bad I would be, considering my whole face would swell up when I was in there. So I can't actually physically ever go back into my camper. With that being said, I realized, probably a night or two after we had left, that, my two youngest daughters, they sleep on the bottom bunk, and it's a queen size bunk. And it's cute at night seeing them like sleeping together, because they're like all like tangled and intermeshed with each other. They're not as small as when we first got the camper, so they're kind of like a little tighter on space. And we have tall kids, and but I realized I was never going to see that again, like in the camper. And like, I didn't realize the last meal I cooked in the camper was the last meal I was going to cook in the camper. Or the last time my daughter baked something in the camper was the last time she was going to bake something in that camper. And so there was a lot, and I'm still kind of processing those feelings. There was a lot of feelings of like loss, like immediate loss. Realizing that I didn't realize how cherished those memories and those things were to me until I couldn't do it anymore. Now, yes, of course, we're going to have the cabin, and there's going to be new memories and everything else. I know that. But there was this period of like initial shock of like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to have that ever again. And I think it's partially because this camper was our first home on our property. And again, it's a 14-year-old camper. It looks like a grandma and grandpa live in it. Like, it's not one of those new fancy ones. It's one of the old, outdated looking ones. But it was still our home. And that's the part that mattered to me, is it was still a roof over our head, a safe place to sleep, a place to lie down and rest, and a place for my kids to grow up in. Now, obviously, that's gone now. Like, today, there's compartments obviously underneath the camper. While the guys were building the wall for our cabin, I was pulling stuff out from underneath the camper, because I can still go in that part. That part's not too moldy. Pulling stuff out, trashing stuff, or reorganizing it to where it just wasn't in the camper anymore, because we're going to have to take the camper to the dump pretty soon, or to wherever, the junkyard, whatever. There is also something my husband and I have talked about, is the whole fact that there's a lot of stuff inside the camper right now that we're just going to have to trash. Like all our bedding, towels, blankets, a whole bunch of stuff. None of it worth really any importance. But there's just a bunch of stuff we're going to have to trash that we weren't planning on trashing. And that kind of sucks. But at the same time, not bringing mold spores into the new house. But it's one of those things where during this time period, I've been processing a lot of emotions and feelings. And then last night, my oldest daughter actually just started, like, I could tell she was off. She wasn't her normal happy self. My oldest daughter is very, very, very mature for her age. Anyone who meets her thinks she's way older than what she actually is. Because she has this maturity about herself, like if she knows something's happening for a certain reason, she doesn't like question it really. And not in the way that she'll just follow people blindly, because believe me, she does not follow people blindly. But she knows we can't live in the camper because there's mold. She doesn't like question that. She knows, okay, that's a logical reason why we would not be in the camper. But it's starting to weigh on her that we're not home, that we're not at our property, that we're not with the animals all the time, and she can't just go run out and play and everything else. Where we're staying at our friend's house, it's in a town. It's on like a little postage stamp piece of property. Like, they're not going out and playing like crazy like they normally do at our property. I mean, we live on 40 acres. Like, there's a huge difference between living out on 40 acres in the middle of nowhere and living in town on, you know, maybe a quarter of an acre. And so she's kind of starting to process those feelings and having somewhat of a hard time with that. And it was interesting because last night when I was talking with her, of course, you know, I'm holding her while she's crying and telling her it's okay to have these feelings. It's okay to have these emotions. Like, I understand you missing being at home. I miss being home too and everything else. And, you know, I'm kind of crying with her somewhat because my heart was just breaking for my daughter. I'm a mom. My baby's crying. Like, and I think sometimes I have a harder time when she cries than when my other kids cry because she is so logical. So to see my super logical kid crying, it hits me in a whole different other way. But I also sat with her and I prayed with her. And I prayed for God to give her peace. I prayed for her to feel his love and all this other stuff. And then I sat and I talked with her about focusing on the positive. And I swear God made my daughter feel this way because he knew I was going to be speaking to the choir when I was talking to her. Because it's the same stuff that I need to keep in mind. I need to remain positive and realize the blessing we have of still having a roof over our head thanks to our friends. That we have these amazing friends that spent their Friday, one of them spent their Friday and their Sunday, and then several of them spent their Sunday today. Well, this video is going to be posted another day, but whatever, on a Sunday, spent their Father's Day helping us build a wall on our cabin. And a lot of these guys were our dads. Like, they could have been doing something else, but they were spending from like 9 to 2 on our property working. And so I'm reminding my daughter how blessed we are to have a family here. While, yes, they're not blood family, they may as well they're just as good, quite frankly, if not better sometimes. Than my extended family, because I don't really even talk to extended family on my side anyways. But the fact that we have a family here who loves us enough to help us build this cabin, who take time out of their day to do this, to have people who have constantly been reaching out to me like, are you doing okay? Are you feeling okay? How are you feeling? Do you need me to take the girls so that you can rest and stuff like that? Like, you know, the women are reaching out asking how they can help. The men are helping build the cabin. Like, it reminded her that while yes, like, because she went down the spiral of she misses being home. So then she started missing the horse that our neighbor had that died almost a year ago. This horse was very special to her though, because this horse was like her person basically when we moved out to this property. Moving, you know, 1,100 miles away from family, this horse became like a strong connection point for her. And then it died suddenly. It got out in a rainstorm and got hit by a car. So she went down this spiral basically of, I miss home. I miss this horse Lightning. I miss, you know, like she said she missed Mia and Papa, which is her grandparents on my husband's side. She missed her cousin, her favorite cousin from back home. She missed playing in the creek at her grandparents' property, my in-laws' parents, or my in-laws' property. Granted, we have 5 creeks on our property, so on our personal property. So she's not starved for creek playtime. But she went down this spiral of like, because she missed one thing, she went down this spiral of all these other things she missed. And it just brought her down so hard. And it's interesting because, I mean, when she's 10, so I'm not surprised something like this happened. But it's interesting because even as adults, we get this way where we miss one thing, or one thing happens, and then it just triggers this whole avalanche of things. And while I haven't done that spiral basically right now. I've done it before, I'm not even gonna lie. I talk to her and I realize, like, when I'm talking to her, like, there's so many times I have to remind myself to focus on the positive. That yes, all these bad things are happening, but at the same time, look at all the beauty that's around it. Like seriously, guys, like, I mean, the fact that we still have a place to stay where we're not having to pay hundreds of dollars a night to stay in like a hotel or a cabin or an Airbnb or something like that, you know, so we're not having to pay extra money. Yeah, we're paying a ton of money in gas to take care of animals, but that's not a big deal. Like, that's whoop-de-doo. It's not that much more than what we pay in a normal week. But like, I had to remind her there's all these blessings. And so like, yeah, there's all these negative things that are kind of like happening in our lives right now. But at the same time, it's also showing how much beauty we have in our lives. And I think sometimes God does that where he is like, hey, sorry, I'm still recovering myself. Hey, here's this really super kind of crappy situation. What are you going to focus on though? Are you going to spiral? Are you going to start focusing on the negative? And are you just going to go down this rabbit hole of like, because you miss one thing, now you miss 13 other things that are unrelated to the first thing you miss? And again, not that my daughter's feelings aren't valid. Like, I totally get her missing her favorite cousin that lives back home. I totally get her missing her grandparents. I totally get her missing that horse. I miss that horse. It was a beautiful Palomino. Like, it was a beautiful horse. And it was so sweet. I cried when it died. I think I cried more than she did. But here's the thing. Are you going to focus on all these negative things that have happened in the past that you have no control over, and you shouldn't be worrying about them anymore? Or are you going to focus on all the beauty and all the positive that's going on in your life around this kind of crappy situation? And so that's what when I was talking to her, I was saying like, hey, you really need to focus on the positive. You really need to focus on the great things we have going on in our lives. Like, yes, I totally understand where you're coming from being sad and everything else, but let's turn this around. And again, like I said, I partially think God made my daughter feel this way just so I could remind myself too, because like I said, I've kind of been on this emotional roller coaster of like, praise Yah, I'm sad. Praise Yah, I'm sad. Like, been on a roller coaster. But it's something that I wanted to share because it is important to remember, excuse me, it is important to remember that in these bad situations that there is positive. And in these bad situations, you need to focus on the positive. Focus on the good things in your life. Focus on, you know, the beautiful friendships you have, the beautiful circumstances that God creates. You know, none of our friends had to come out today and help us build a wall in our cabin. None of them have to come out and help us with the rest of the build, but I know they will, because they love us, because they're freaking amazing. Like, you know, because they're really, really good people. And Yah has blessed us with these people. We didn't know any of these people prior to moving here. But Yah knew that we would all come together, and he knew that these friendships would be formed and everything else. And he knew these friendships would be formed prior to us ever even buying this property and everything else. One of our friends actually today, he brought a nail gun and I think a table saw. And my husband's like, hey, you want to take this back to your house? Like, or do you want to keep it here? Like, what do you want to do with this? And our friend said, nah, just keep it. And then he told us a cool story about how those two things were actually him and his wife's wedding presents to each other. They didn't want to get each other something like silly. They wanted to get themselves something that was practical for their future, for when they build their homestead. And they've never used them. And it's not that they have a homestead they're building and stuff like that, but they're living in a house already. So it's something they haven't had to use these tools for yet. And our friend, he got so happy because he's like, yeah, we bought these, like, and he was telling us the story. He's like, but we get to use it for your guys' home instead. Like, he was so happy that he could use these tools that him and his wife bought each other for their wedding for our house. And guess what, guys? We didn't know them when they got married. We didn't know them until, gosh, a little over a year after they were married. So it's one of those things. It's like even even to that extent, like these wonderful people bought these tools for a wedding present to each other, but they ended up using it on our house. And it's kind of beautiful how Yah works. It's beautiful to see how he brings people together. And that's something that, like I said, I was teaching my daughter, we have to focus on the positive and whatever's going on in your life that's negative. I don't know what kind of situations you're going through right now. But instead of going down that spiral of, oh, this bad thing's happening, and you remember that bad thing that happened, and then that bad thing that happened, and then that bad thing that happened, and like going down this spiral of mourning, basically, turn it around. Think about all the positive that's in your life. Think about the beautiful people in your life. Think about the work that Yah is doing in your life. Think about the work that the things that he's teaching you, the things that he's showing you. And think about the things that you're going to learn from this crappy situation. Because there's a whole lot of things we're learning right now, like how to build a house. But just keeping the right perspective, guys. I know it's hard. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do. But it takes practice. So when you are in these situations, really, really try to focus yourself on the good things going on and not all the bad stuff. Because focusing on the bad stuff will make the bad stuff seem worse. It'll diminish the positive. And I can promise you, even in this situation that we're in right now, the positive has far outweighed the negative, 1000%. So I just wanted to share that with y'all. Please continue to keep our family on our prayers. Like I said, my husband's sick again from going in the camper. My kids are good. I'm almost better. I'm getting there. But keep my husband in your prayers because he's sick now. So yeah. All right, y'all. Hope you have a great day.